The late evening sky had turned a deep purple as streetlights flickered on one by one. Officer James Mercer sat in his patrol car, drumming his fingers against the steering wheel. He'd been working this wealthy neighborhood for 3 years now, and he had his own ideas about who belonged here and who didn't. The radio crackled with routine updates, but James wasn't paying much attention. His eyes narrowed as he spotted a sleek black BMW turning onto Oakwood Drive. The car was well maintained, with slightly tinted windows that still followed legal limits. But what caught his attention wasn't the car itself. It was the driver. Well, he muttered to himself, flicking on his lights. Let's see what we have here. The BMW signaled properly and pulled over smoothly, stopping in a perfect position on the side of the road.
James noticed this with a hint of disappointment.
He'd been hoping for something, anything, to justify what he was about to do. Inside the BMW, Dr. Elise Washington took a deep breath. The blue lights flashing in her rearview mirror were an unwelcome but familiar sight. At 34, she had been pulled over 17 times in the last decade, despite having a perfect driving record. The statistics weren't lost on her. As both a black woman and a civil rights attorney, she knew exactly what was happening. Not tonight, she whispered, glancing at her watch. It was nearly 10 p.m. and she'd just wrapped up preparation for a major case. The folders on her passenger seat contained months of work, evidence of police misconduct that she would present in court next week. Elise reached for her purse slowly, removing her wallet before placing both hands visibly on the steering wheel, a routine she had practiced countless times and taught to others. She lowered her window halfway, enough to communicate but not enough to seem too accessible. In his patrol car, James ran the license plate. The BMW was registered to Dr. Elise Washington, with no flags, no tickets, not even a parking violation. This should have been the end of it, but James unbuckled his seatbelt anyway. He hadn't recognized the name, and something about a black woman driving an expensive car in this neighborhood after dark struck him as suspicious. He wouldn't have used that word if pressed. He would have said unusual or worth checking. Out, James approached the driver's side. Flashlight aimed slightly too high directly at Elise's face. The bright beam made her squint, but she didn't raise a hand to block it or make any sudden movements. "License and registration," he said, skipping any greeting. Elise nodded. "My license is in my hand and I'll need to reach to the glove compartment for my registration. Is that all right?" James gave a curt nod, watching her every move with unwarranted intensity. "Do you know why I pulled you over tonight?" he asked, examining her license with a frown. "No, officer, I don't," Elise replied calmly. "Was I speeding?" James handed back her documents more roughly than necessary. "You were driving erratically. Seemed like you might have had something to drink." This was a lie, and they both knew it. Elise had been driving exactly at the speed limit, had used her turn signal, and had followed every traffic rule to the letter, a habit born from necessity. "I haven't had anything to drink, officer. I'm coming from my office. I'm an attorney, and I was preparing for a case." James's eyebrows raised slightly, doubt clear on his face. "An attorney? At this hour? And what brings you to this neighborhood? You don't live around here, do you?" The implication was clear. You don't belong here. "I'm taking Oakwood to connect to the highway," Elise explained, though she knew she didn't owe him this information. "It's the fastest route home from my office downtown." James shined his flashlight into the car, lingering on the stack of folders on the passenger seat. The label on one was partially visible. City Police Department, Misconduct Investigation. "What kind of law do you practice exactly?" His tone had shifted, a new edge to his voice. Elise considered her words carefully. "Civil rights law." Something flickered across James's face, recognition perhaps, or concern. But it was quickly replaced with a hardened expression. "Step out of the vehicle, please." "May I ask why, officer?" Elise kept her voice steady, though her heart rate had picked up. She discreetly pressed a button on her phone, which was sitting in the center console. The screen remained dark, but the recording function had activated, another habit she had developed out of necessity. "I smell something suspicious. Need to check the vehicle." Elise knew this tactic well. There was nothing to smell, but it was a common excuse used to justify unnecessary searches. She also knew her rights. "Officer, I don't consent to a search of my vehicle. There is nothing illegal in my car, and you have no probable cause for a search." James's face tightened with anger. He wasn't used to being challenged, especially not by someone who knew the law as well as he did. Or better. Look, I'm just doing my job here. If you have nothing to hide, it's not about having something to hide, Elise interrupted, her professional training kicking in. It's about constitutional rights that apply to everyone. I've identified myself, provided my documents, and answered your questions. Unless you're detaining me for a specific violation, I'd like to know if I'm free to go. The standoff continued for several seconds, tension crackling in the air between them. In the distance, another car approached, slowing as it passed the scene. The driver was an older white man who lived in the neighborhood. He gave Officer Mercer a questioning look, clearly surprised to see police activity on their quiet street. This brief moment of public scrutiny seemed to make James reconsider. His hand, which had been resting near his holster, relaxed slightly. "Wait here," he said finally, taking her license and registration back to his patrol car. Elise watched in her side mirror as James sat in his vehicle, speaking into his radio and typing on his computer. She used the moment to text her husband, "Being pulled over again. Oakwood Drive, recording on. Don't worry." It was another routine they had established years ago. Always let someone know where you are. In his patrol car, James was running a thorough check on Dr. Elise Washington. His initial search had shown no infractions, but he was digging deeper now, looking for anything: unpaid parking tickets, an expired license, anything that would justify his behavior. What he found instead made his stomach tighten. Dr. Elise Washington wasn't just any attorney. She had graduated top of her class from Harvard Law, clerked for a Supreme Court justice, and now headed the Civil Rights Division at one of the city's most prestigious law firms. More importantly, she had won several high-profile cases against police departments, including one last year that had made national headlines. And now, according to his database, she was lead counsel on a case against their very own department, a case involving racial profiling during traffic stops. James sat back, the reality of what he'd done sinking in. He had just pulled over the exact wrong person for the exact reason she was suing the department. His actions tonight were a textbook example of the problem she was fighting against. He looked through his windshield at the BMW. Dr. Washington sat perfectly still, hands visible on the steering wheel, waiting. She had done nothing wrong, and they both knew it. But only one of them had the power to end this interaction, and only one of them would face consequences for it. James took another moment to consider his options. He could double down, find some minor violation to justify the stop. Or he could admit, at least to himself, what had really happened here. The weight of his badge suddenly felt heavier on his chest. With a deep sigh, he gathered her documents and stepped out of his patrol car, walking back to her window with a very different posture than before. What neither of them knew was how much this single traffic stop was about to change both their lives and perhaps the department itself, forever. "Officer." James walked back to the BMW, his mind racing. The confident attorney sitting in the driver's seat was not what he had expected when he'd first flipped on his lights. He reached her window, handing back her license and registration with notably more care than before. "Is there a problem, Officer Mercer?" Elise asked, noticing the change in his demeanor. His name badge caught the streetlight as he shifted his weight. James cleared his throat. "No, ma'am. Everything checks out." He paused, then added lamely, "Just be careful around here at night." Elise raised an eyebrow. "And why is that, officer? Is this neighborhood particularly dangerous?" They both knew it wasn't. Oakwood Heights was one of the safest areas in the city with some of the lowest crime rates in the state. "No, it's just routine advice," he muttered, already regretting his words. "I see." Elise didn't break eye contact. So was there an actual traffic violation, or was this stop for another reason? The directness of her question caught James off guard. Most people, even when they suspected the real reason for being pulled over, wouldn't challenge an officer so openly. But Elise Washington wasn't most people. "I thought I saw you swerve," he lied, the words sounding hollow even to his own ears. "Did your dash cam record this alleged swerve?" Elise asked. James stiffened. The dash cam would show nothing of the sort, and they both knew it. His patrol car recorded everything from the moment he turned on his lights. "Look, you're free to go, Dr. Washington," he said, trying to end the conversation. But Elise wasn't finished. She took out her phone, now openly recording. "Officer Mercer, I'd like to understand exactly why you pulled me over tonight. I've already explained—" "No," she interrupted firmly. You haven't. You claimed I was driving erratically, then mentioned a swerve that didn't happen. What I'd like to know is if you were aware that out of the 312 traffic stops in this neighborhood in the past 6 months, 287 involved black drivers, despite this area being 92% white. James felt heat rising to his face. I don't keep track of those statistics, ma'am. Well, I do, Elise replied calmly. In fact, those numbers are part of the case I'm building against your department right now. Case number 47CR9382. Perhaps you've heard of it? James had in fact heard whispers about this case. Every officer in the department had. It was the reason they'd all been called into extra training sessions recently. The reason their captain had been especially tense at briefings. I'm just doing my job, James said, falling back on the standard defense. Your job is to protect and serve all citizens equally, Officer Mercer, not to profile them based on their race. Elise's voice remained level, but there was an unmistakable intensity behind her words. Do you know what the legal standard for a traffic stop is? James knew she was testing him, but pride made him answer anyway. Reasonable suspicion, that's right. And what was your reasonable suspicion in my case? Was it my speed? My driving pattern? Or was it the color of my skin combined with the type of car I drive? James felt trapped. Each question was like a carefully placed step in a legal maze he hadn't realized he'd entered. Whatever he said now would likely end up as evidence in her case. I think we're done here, he said, taking a step back from the car. Actually, we're just getting started, Elise replied. She pulled out a business card and handed it to him. I'd like your badge number and the name of your supervising officer, please. James hesitated, then reluctantly provided the information. Department policy required him to identify himself when asked. Thank you, Elise said, typing the details into her phone. Now, am I free to go, or is there an actual reason you're detaining me? You're free to go, James mumbled, stepping further back from the car. Elise started her engine but didn't pull away immediately. Instead, she looked directly at James again. Officer Mercer, I want you to know something. This isn't personal. What's happening here is part of a much bigger problem, and fixing it will ultimately make your job safer and more effective. I hope you'll think about that. With those words hanging in the air, she drove away, leaving James standing alone by the side of the road, her business card clutched in his hand. Back in his patrol car, James sat motionless for several minutes. The encounter had not gone as he'd expected. Usually these stops followed a predictable pattern. He'd find some minor infraction, maybe issue a warning, assert his authority, and move on. People didn't usually challenge him like Dr. Washington had, especially not with such precision and confidence. He picked up his radio to call in, then hesitated. What exactly would he report? That he'd pulled over a civil rights attorney for no legitimate reason, and she'd called him out on it? That she was now adding his name to a lawsuit against the department? That didn't seem like a conversation he wanted to have over the open channel. As he sat there contemplating his next move, his phone buzzed with a text from his partner, Officer Luis Rodriguez. Everything okay? Dispatch said you've been stationary for 20 minutes, and James typed back. All good, paperwork, back on patrol soon. The lie came easily, but a new feeling was settling in his stomach, something between shame and fear. He'd been on the force for 8 years, and until tonight, he'd never really questioned his methods. If pressed, he would have said he was just being thorough, looking for suspicious activity using his instincts. But Dr. Washington's questions had forced him to confront the patterns in his policing that he'd never acknowledged, even to himself. Meanwhile, Elise was driving home, her hands still tight on the steering wheel. Despite her outward composure during the stop, her heart was racing. These encounters never got easier, no matter how many times she went through them or how well she knew her rights. She pressed the button on her car's Bluetooth system. Call Thomas, she said. Her husband answered on the second ring. Hey, you okay? The worry in his voice was evident. I'm fine, Elise assured him. Just another stop. Officer James Mercer, badge number 4872. Same neighborhood? Yes, same stretch of road as last month. I think they might have a regular patrol targeting that area, Thomas sighed. Did you get it recorded? Yes, on my phone, and his dash cam should have everything too. I'll request the footage tomorrow. Did he have a reason this time? Elise gave a short, humorless laugh. He claimed I was swerving, then driving erratically, then just told me to be careful at night. Same old story, Thomas replied, the frustration evident in his voice. They'd been having these conversations for years. Actually, this time was different, Elise said after a moment. I think he recognized my name halfway through. The department must have flagged me because of the case. Is that good or bad? Elise considered the question as she turned onto their street. I'm not sure yet, but I did see something in his face when he realized who I was. Almost like embarrassment. Well, he should be embarrassed, Thomas said firmly. It's not just about making individual officers feel bad, though, Elise replied, pulling into their driveway. It's about changing the system. And sometimes that starts with one person realizing they're part of the problem. As she walked toward their front door, Elise couldn't shake the feeling that tonight's encounter might be different from the others. There had been something in Officer Mercer's eyes, a flicker of recognition, not just of her name, but perhaps of his own biases. Back at the station at the end of his shift, James found himself staring at Dr. Washington's business card again. Her firm's logo was embossed in silver against the cream-colored card. Prestigious, professional, powerful. Everything about it said she was someone who mattered, someone with influence, and he had pulled her over for nothing. Rough night? Asked Sergeant Patel, dropping into the chair next to him in the break room. James quickly tucked the card into his pocket. Just tired, I hear you. End of shift can't come soon enough. Sergeant Patel took a sip of her coffee, then added casually, By the way, Captain wants everyone at the briefing early tomorrow. Something about new department policies on traffic stops. James felt his stomach sink. Any idea what prompted that? Sergeant Patel shrugged. Some hotshot lawyer's been collecting data on our stops. Claims there's a pattern of racial bias. The brass is getting nervous. Right, James said, his mouth suddenly dry. I think I heard something about that. As he gathered his things to leave, James couldn't shake the feeling that his comfortable world was about to change dramatically. Dr. Washington's words echoed in his head. This isn't personal. What's happening here is part of a much bigger problem. The problem was it felt very personal now, and he had a sinking feeling that the confrontation tonight was just the beginning. The next morning arrived with a gray drizzle that matched James's mood perfectly. He sat in the back row of the briefing room, coffee in hand, trying to look attentive as Captain Rivera addressed the room full of officers. As some of you may have heard, the captain was saying, there's been increased scrutiny on our department's traffic stop practices. Starting today, we're implementing new guidelines. A collective groan rippled through the room. New guidelines usually meant more paperwork, more restrictions, more hoops to jump through. I know, Captain Rivera held up a hand. But this is serious, people. We've got a civil rights attorney building a case against us, Dr. Elise Washington. At the mention of her name, James nearly choked on his coffee. A few officers turned to look at him, and he quickly composed himself. Dr. Washington has compiled data suggesting racial bias in our traffic stops, particularly in the Oakwood Heights area. The captain pulled up a map on the screen showing red dots clustered along certain streets, the very streets James regularly patrolled. This isn't just about bad publicity, Captain Rivera continued. This is about potentially millions in legal settlements and, more importantly, about whether we're truly serving our community the way we should be. James sank lower in his seat, the memory of last night's encounter burning fresh in his mind. Additionally, the captain added, Dr. Washington will be conducting a training session here next Wednesday on constitutional rights during traffic stops. Attendance is mandatory. Another groan from the officers, louder this time. That's all for now. Sergeant Patel will distribute the new guidelines. Dismissed. As officers began filing out, Captain Rivera called out, Mercer, a word in my office, please. James froze. Had Dr. Washington already filed a complaint? Had the captain somehow heard about last night? He followed Rivera to his office, heart pounding. Close the door, Rivera said, settling behind his desk. James obeyed, then stood awkwardly, waiting. Sit down, Mercer. You look like you're about to pass out. James sat, forcing a casual expression. What's up, Captain? Rivera studied him for a moment. You patrol Oakwood Heights regularly, right? Yes, sir. Have you noticed the pattern Dr. Washington is talking about? The disproportionate stops of black drivers? James hesitated. Until last night, he hadn't thought of it as a pattern. It was just policing, looking for things that seemed out of place, following hunches using experience. I'm not sure what you're asking. Sir, Rivera leaned forward. I'm asking if you've been targeting black drivers, Mercer. The directness of the question caught James off guard. No, sir. I stop suspicious vehicles. It's not about race. Then how do you explain these numbers? Rivera pushed a folder across the desk. James opened it to find a spreadsheet of traffic stops in Oakwood Heights, broken down by officer. His name had the highest number of stops and the highest percentage of black drivers stopped. I don't know, he stammered, genuinely shocked by the data. Had he really stopped that many? And had that many really been black drivers? You better figure it out before next Wednesday, Rivera said. Because Dr. Washington specifically requested your attendance at her training. James felt his stomach drop. She knows who I am? Rivera's eyebrows shot up. Should she? Too late, James realized his mistake. No, I just meant, since I patrol that area. The captain's eyes narrowed. Mercer, is there something I should know? James considered coming clean about last night's stop, but fear held him back. No, sir, nothing. Rivera didn't look convinced, but he nodded. Dismissed. And Mercer? Think carefully about your approach out there. James left the office in a daze, nearly bumping into Luis in the hallway. Hey, what was that about? Luis asked, falling into step beside him. Nothing, just questions about my patrol area. Luis gave him a knowing look. Because of that lawyer, right? Man, she's really stirring things up. Heard she's like a pit bull in court. Never lets go once she bites down on a case. James nodded absently, his mind elsewhere. He needed to see exactly what Dr. Washington was claiming in this lawsuit. During his lunch break, James sat in his car and used his phone to search for information about Dr. Elise Washington. The results were overwhelming. Harvard Law School graduate, former clerk for a Supreme Court justice, partner at one of the city's most prestigious firms, multiple landmark civil rights victories. Her official bio photo showed her looking directly at the camera, with the same unflinching gaze she had given him last night. He scrolled further and found news articles about her current case against the department. The latest one made his blood run cold. Civil rights attorney adds new evidence in police profiling case. The article, dated just this morning, didn't name him specifically, but it mentioned new evidence of racial profiling from a traffic stop in Oakwood Heights last night. James closed his browser, feeling sick. He was now part of her case. Across town, Elise sat in her office reviewing the dashcam footage her assistant had just obtained through an emergency records request. The video clearly showed her BMW driving perfectly within the lane, using proper signals, following all traffic laws. Then came Officer Mercer's lights, the stop, and their conversation, all recorded from the perspective of his patrol car. This is exactly what we needed, she told her assistant Anthony. Clear evidence of a stop with no reasonable suspicion. Do you think he realized who you were? Anthony asked. Eventually, Elise replied. But not until after he'd already made the stop. That's what makes this so valuable for the case. She leaned back in her chair, thinking, Officer James Mercer. She'd gone through his record that morning. 8 years on the force. Numerous commendations. No official complaints, but that wasn't surprising. Many people, especially people of color, were reluctant to file formal complaints against police officers. What had surprised her was his patrol record. The data showed a clear pattern. Officer Mercer stopped black drivers at a rate nearly 6 times higher than his fellow officers patrolling the same area. Her phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. It was Police Commissioner Harold Wilson. Dr. Washington, he greeted her. I understand you've added a new incident to your case file. News travels fast, Commissioner, Elise replied, unsurprised that he'd already heard. Yes, I experienced firsthand what our data has been showing all along. The Commissioner sighed. I won't pretend to be happy about this development, but I want you to know I'm taking your concerns seriously. The new guidelines went out to all officers this morning. Guidelines are a start, Elise acknowledged, but they're not enough without accountability and real culture change. Which brings me to the reason for my call, the Commissioner said. Your training session next week. I'd like to expand it to include all officers, not just the Oakwood Heights Patrol. Elise hadn't expected this. It was a significant concession and opportunity. I'd be happy to accommodate that. Good, and one more thing. This officer from last night, Mercer, what are your plans regarding him specifically? Elise considered her answer carefully. She didn't want to show her full hand, but she also saw an opening. That depends partly on him, Commissioner. on whether he's capable of recognizing his own biases and changing his approach. He's a good officer in many ways, the commissioner said, his tone cautious. Young, but has potential. Many biased officers are good officers in many ways, Elise countered. The question is whether they're good officers to everyone they serve. After ending the call, Elise pulled up Officer Mercer's file again, studying his photo. There had been something in his eyes last night. Shock, certainly, and embarrassment. But perhaps something else, too. Understanding, regret? It was too early to tell. Her secretary buzzed her intercom. Dr. Washington? There's an Officer James Mercer here to see you. He doesn't have an appointment. Elise raised her eyebrows in surprise. This was unexpected. Send him in, please. She stood as her office door opened and Officer Mercer entered. He wasn't in uniform, instead wearing jeans and a plain button-down shirt. Without his badge and gun, he looked younger, less intimidating. Dr. Washington, he said, his voice stiff. I hope I'm not interrupting. Not at all, Elise replied, gesturing to the chair across from her desk. This is unexpected. James remained standing, clearly uncomfortable. I saw the news article. About new evidence in your case, yes? That's me, isn't it? I'm the new evidence. Elise studied him for a moment, then nodded. Your stop last night demonstrated exactly the pattern we've been documenting. James took a deep breath. I didn't come here to argue or to make excuses. I came because I think I need to understand something. For the first time, Elise saw genuine confusion in his expression, maybe even a willingness to listen. She gestured again to the chair. Please sit down. This time he did. And as he settled into the chair across from her desk, both of them knew that whatever happened next would change everything. For him, for her case, and potentially for the entire department. The silence in Elise's office stretched between them like a living thing. James sat stiffly in the chair, his hands resting awkwardly on his knees. This wasn't where he had expected to find himself today, sitting across from the woman he had wrongfully pulled over, in her domain rather than his. Why did you come here, Officer Mercer? Elise finally asked, her voice neutral but not unkind. James looked down at his hands, then back up at her. I saw the data this morning, about my stops in Oakwood Heights, and I didn't recognize myself in those numbers. His voice was quiet but steady. I've never thought of myself as a prejudiced, but the numbers don't lie, do they? Elise leaned forward slightly. Most people don't wake up in the morning planning to be biased, Officer Mercer. That's what makes implicit bias so dangerous. It operates below our conscious awareness. James nodded slowly. Last night, when I saw your car, I didn't think I'm going to pull over a black driver. I just saw something that didn't fit what I expected in that neighborhood. And what was that exactly? A black woman in an expensive car, driving through a wealthy white area late at night. As he said it out loud, James winced at his own words. It sounds terrible when I say it like that. It sounds like profiling, Elise said simply. Which is exactly what it was. James didn't argue. Instead, he asked, what happens now? With your case, I mean. Am I going to be named in it? Elise considered him for a moment. That depends. Right now, you're Officer X in our filing, an example of the pattern not personally named. Whether that changes depends partly on you. What do you mean? I'm not interested in ending individual careers, Officer Mercer. I'm interested in changing systemic practices. If you're willing to be part of that change rather than an obstacle to it, then perhaps we can find a constructive way forward. Hope flickered across James's face. Like what? First, Elise said, I need to truly understand why you came here today. Was it just to save yourself from being named in a lawsuit? Or was it something more? James took a deep breath. Honestly, at first I was just scared for my job, but then I saw those numbers, and I started thinking about all the stops I've made, about how many of them were based on just feelings, hunches, things that seemed off to me. He paused, and I started wondering how many people I've hurt who didn't have your resources to fight back. Elise studied him, looking for signs of insincerity, finding none. What would you say to those people if you could talk to them now? I'd say I'm sorry. The words came out rough, unpracticed. And that I want to do better. A moment passed between them, something shifting, a possibility opening up. There might be a way you can do more than apologize, Elise said finally. Something that could help our case while also helping you understand the impact of these practices. I'm listening. We've created a community dialogue program as part of our proposed settlement. Officers meet with community members who've experienced biased policing to listen and learn from their stories. It hasn't been implemented yet because the department hasn't agreed to the settlement. But we're running a pilot version. And you want me to participate? Yes, not as punishment, but as a genuine opportunity to grow, to see the human cost of these practices. James considered this. And if I do this? What happens with your case? The case continues, Elise said firmly. But your willingness to participate would be noted. And if you find the experience valuable, your testimony about it could help persuade others in the department that these changes are worth making. I'd be testifying against my own department, James said, doubt creeping back into his voice. No, Elise corrected him. You'd be testifying for better policing, for practices that serve everyone in your community, not just some of them. Their conversation was interrupted by a knock at the door. Anthony, Elise's assistant, poked his head in. Sorry to interrupt, Dr. Washington, but Commissioner Wilson is on line 1. He says it's urgent. Elise nodded. Tell him I'll call him back in 10 minutes. After Anthony left, Elise turned back to James. I need to take that call soon. Do you need time to think about my offer? James shook his head. No, I'll do it. The community program, I mean. You understand this won't make the case go away? It won't erase what happened. I understand. I'm not looking for an easy way out. I want to be better at my job. A better officer. Elise wrote something on a notepad, then handed it to him. This is the address for our first session. Tomorrow evening at 7. It's at the community center on Maple Street. James took the paper, folding it carefully before putting it in his pocket. I'll be there. As he stood to leave, Elise added, One more thing, Officer Mercer. Come in civilian clothes, not your uniform. This needs to be a conversation between equals. James nodded, understanding. Thank you for not just writing me off. Everyone deserves a chance to learn and grow, Elise replied, even those who've made mistakes. After James left, Elise picked up the phone to return the commissioner's call, her mind already spinning with the implications of what had just happened. Officer Mercer's willingness to participate could change the dynamics of her case significantly. Dr. Washington, Commissioner Wilson, greeted her. I've just received some concerning information. There's a video circulating among our officers of your traffic stop last night. Elise sat up straighter. A video? From the dash cam? No. It appears someone recorded Officer Mercer's computer screen while he was reviewing the footage this morning. It's been shared informally among some officers. This was unexpected. I see, and you're telling me this because there are 2 reactions happening, and both matter to your case, the commissioner said. Some officers are circling the wagons defensive, angry that one of their own is being targeted as they see it. And the other reaction? Others are uncomfortable. Seeing the stop play out, hearing the lack of any real cause, it's making some of them reflect on their own practices. I've had 3 officers come to me today asking about additional training on bias awareness. Elise absorbed this information. That's significant. Yes, it is, which is why I'm calling. I'd like to move up your training session, not wait until next week. The sooner we address this, the better. After finalizing the details with the commissioner, Elise sat back in her chair thinking. The case was evolving faster than she had anticipated. Officer Mercer's unexpected visit, the video circulating among officers, the commissioner's newfound urgency, all of it suggested a tipping point might be approaching. She pulled up the draft settlement agreement on her computer. Perhaps it was time to revise some of the terms, to strengthen the community involvement provisions while offering a clearer path forward for officers willing to change. The next evening, Elise arrived at the community center early to help set up. The large meeting room had been arranged with chairs in a circle, no tables, nothing to hide behind or use as a barrier. As people began to arrive, she greeted them, introducing community members to each other. At exactly 7 o'clock, James walked in. He was wearing jeans and a simple blue sweater, looking nervous but determined. Conversations quieted as people noticed him, some with surprised expressions, others with wary ones. Everyone, Elise said, this is James Mercer. He's here to participate in our dialogue, to listen and learn. James, would you like to introduce yourself? James looked around the circle at the faces watching him. black and brown community members who had experienced the same kind of profiling he had inflicted on Elise and others. He swallowed hard. My name is James Mercer. I'm a police officer with the city department. He paused, then added with difficult honesty, and I'm here because I recently realized I've been part of the problem we're all here to discuss. I want to understand how to be part of the solution instead. A murmur went through the room, surprise, skepticism, and from a few cautious appreciation for his candor. An older black man named Daniel, who had been stopped 17 times in the past 5 years despite having no violations, spoke up first. Well, Officer Mercer, that's a start. A small one, but a start. Take a seat and listen to what we have to say. Really listen. James nodded and took an empty chair. As the session began and people started sharing their stories of fear, humiliation, and injustice at the hands of officers like him, he did exactly that. He listened, and for the first time he truly heard. Meanwhile, across town, the video of Elise's traffic stop continued to spread among the department's officers, forcing uncomfortable conversations and raising questions that could no longer be ignored. The consequences were just beginning to unfold, rippling outward in ways no one could have predicted from that single traffic stop on a quiet street in Oakwood Heights. 6 months had passed since that fateful traffic stop. The seasons had changed, trees that were bare now filled with green leaves, and on this warm spring afternoon James Mercer sat on a bench outside the courthouse loosening his tie. The settlement hearing had just concluded, the culmination of months of negotiations between the police department and Dr. Washington's legal team. Inside his jacket pocket was the printed copy of the agreement. 57 pages that would transform policing in their city, new training requirements, community oversight boards, changed metrics for evaluating officers, body cameras for every patrol, and most importantly to James, the permanent establishment of the community dialogue program that had changed his life. Mind if I join you? James looked up to see Elise standing there, no longer his adversary but something closer to a colleague. Please, he said. Sliding over to make room, she sat down, still in her court attire, a sharp navy suit that radiated authority. How are you feeling? Relieved, James admitted. Proud too, I think. Though I'm not sure I have the right to feel proud about fixing something I helped break. Elise smiled slightly. Growth deserves acknowledgement, Officer Mercer. James, he corrected her. After all they'd been through together, formalities seemed unnecessary. James, she agreed. Your testimony made a difference today. You know that, right? He shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. I just told the truth. The truth coming from you carries weight. An officer admitting to his own biased practices, explaining how the system encouraged those behaviors, and then showing a different way forward. That's powerful. James thought back to the courtroom, to the moment he'd stood before the judge and explained how he'd come to recognize his own prejudice, how the community dialogues had opened his eyes to the harm he'd caused, how working with Dr. Washington had shown him that better policing was possible. The real heroes are people like Daniel and the others who shared their stories even though they had every reason to give up on the system, James said, coming back week after week to talk with officers who might have been the same ones who profiled them. That takes real courage. It does, Elise agreed, which is why we need to make sure this settlement isn't just words on paper. The real work starts now, James nodded. The settlement was a beginning, not an end. How's the training program coming along? Over the past months, James had become increasingly involved in helping Elise develop police training on bias recognition and community engagement. What had started as his own personal journey had gradually evolved into a new role, a bridge between the department and the community. Almost ready, Elise said. We've incorporated feedback from the pilot sessions. The commissioner has approved the final curriculum. Now we just need the right person to lead it. James caught her meaningful look. Me? You're not serious? Completely serious. Who better? You've lived this transformation. You can speak to officers in their language, understand their defenses and hesitations. I'm not a trainer. Elise, I'm just a patrol officer. Not anymore. She pulled an envelope from her bag and handed it to him. The commissioner asked me to give you this. James opened it with confusion, then surprise as he read the official letterhead. Special Liaison for Community Relations? This is a new position. Created specifically for you. Part of the settlement implementation. You'll split your time between patrol and training, serving as a direct link between the department and Community Oversight Board. James stared at the letter, emotions washing over him. 6 months ago, he'd been terrified of losing his job. Now he was being offered a chance to help reshape the department from within. I don't know what to say. Say yes, Elise replied simply. We need you. As they sat there, a group of protesters caught their attention across the street. They held signs celebrating the settlement victory, chanting for justice and accountability. James recognized many faces from the community dialogues. Daniel was there, now a respected leader in the oversight committee, his arm around his teenage grandson. Remember when half the officers wouldn't even sit in the same room with those community members? James asked. Elise nodded. And now look. Across the street, a uniformed officer, Officer Luis Rodriguez, James's former partner, approached the protesters. Instead of tension, there were handshakes. Luis had been one of the first to follow James's example, joining the dialogue sessions, voluntarily after seeing the video of Elise's traffic stop. It's not perfect, Elise acknowledged. We still have a long way to go. But it's progress. James thought about how much had changed, not just in policy, but in people. Himself most of all. I keep thinking about that night, he said quietly. How differently it could have gone if you hadn't been who you are, if you hadn't had the resources and knowledge to challenge me. That's why this work matters so much, Elise replied. Because most people don't have my resources. They're pulled over or stopped on the street, and they're afraid. They don't know their rights or they're afraid to assert them, they just want to get home safely. I didn't understand that before. The fear. And now I think about it every time I put on the uniform, James said. How the same badge that makes some people feel safe makes others feel threatened. That's a heavy responsibility. A comfortable silence fell between them, both watching the scene across the street. The small but significant image of community members and officers talking as equals. So, Elise said finally, will you take the position? James folded the letter carefully. On one condition. What's that? That we expand the training, not just for our department but offer it to neighboring counties too. This can't just be about fixing one department in one city. Elise smiled, clearly pleased with his thinking. I think that can be arranged. The settlement includes provisions for expanding successful programs. Then yes, James said. I'm in. They stood, preparing to go their separate ways. Elise to her office to continue her legal work, James to the precinct to begin his new role. But before they parted, Elise offered her hand. I never thought I'd say this 6 months ago, but I'm glad you pulled me over that night, Officer Mercer. James shook her hand firmly. And I'm grateful you called me out on it, Dr. Washington. 3 weeks later, James stood at the front of a packed training room. Officers from his department sat side by side with community members, all there for the first official training session under the settlement agreement. At the back of the room, Elise watched with Commissioner Wilson, both there to observe this milestone. My name is Officer James Mercer, he began, looking out at the skeptical faces of his fellow officers. 6 months ago, I pulled over a black woman driving through Oakwood Heights for no legitimate reason. I didn't think of it as racist at the time. I told myself it was just good policing, following my instincts, keeping the neighborhood safe. He paused, letting the words sink in. I was wrong, and that traffic stop changed everything, for me, for our department, and hopefully for our community. He gestured to the presentation screen behind him, which showed a simple slide with words that had become his personal mission statement. Equal protection, equal service, equal respect. Today we're going to talk about what those words really mean in practice, not just as slogans, but as actions. How we can be better officers by recognizing our biases and changing our behaviors. As he continued, the presentation, introducing Daniel and other community members who would share their experiences, James caught Elise's eye. She gave him a small nod of approval. Later, as officers and community members broke into discussion groups, Elise approached him. That was excellent, she said. You've got them engaged, even the skeptics. James nodded toward a particularly animated group where Luis was deep in conversation with Daniel. It's a start. A good one, Elise agreed. By the way, I have something for you. She handed him a small box. Inside was a simple silver keychain with an inscription. The journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. To remind you, the change happens one person, one interaction at a time, she explained, just like that night on Oakwood Drive. James closed his hand around the keychain, feeling its weight, light in his palm but heavy with meaning. Thank you, he said simply. As they looked around the room, at officers and community members talking, listening, sometimes arguing but always engaging, both knew that what they were witnessing was just the beginning. Real change would take years of hard work, persistence, and courage from people on all sides. But standing there, watching a room full of people who 6 months ago might never have spoken to each other now working toward a common goal, they both felt something that had been in short supply for too long. Hope. And it had all started with a traffic stop on a quiet street, a moment that could have ended with nothing changing, as so many similar moments had before. Instead, it had become the catalyst for transformation, not just for James and Elise, but for an entire community.